Good morning, Coldwell Banker George Realty. Thank you all for attending this training. We're going to go over the new commission forms, and try to answer everybody's question. I am here, Peter Cam is here. We have a full room and a lot of people on Zoom. So what we'll do is we'll go through each form, and then I will briefly stop, and then we'll take questions. And like I mentioned to the ones that were here earlier, next Thursday, for the next 3 Thursdays, we will schedule an hour or an hour and a half in our training room, not Zoom. But if you're not understanding the forms, or you need help on a listing agreement or a purchase agreement, please come. We will be here live to help you, because we want to keep helping you as long as needed, because we want to make sure that we all understand this. For myself, I've been through several trainings as well, and trying to digest too. So let's go and get started. So the first disclosure that I have here is the disclosure and modification to the listing agreement. So let's say you have a residential property that is currently on the MLS and was listed prior to all of this, these revisions, and it hasn't sold. And we understand that CRMLS will be removing the commissions as of August 13th, so a little bit earlier than the 17th. If that is the case for you, you need to take this form or email the form over to your seller on that contract, the contract you have. So we need to give them this modification to the listing agreement so they understand the new terms. So if you look down here, I've highlighted the main crux of this. Seller and broker agree that the total compensation shall be reduced by the amount authorized to be offered in the MLS. So for instance, if you were going to offer the buyer's agent 2%, 2.5, then the listing agreement would be modified to that by that much to leave you with your 2.5 or your 3 or whatever. Or you can click this box shall not be. So we have this situation as well. We have one listing that is residential that's up that will not be most likely sold or in escrow by that point. So we're going to provide them this form. But in addition to that, I'm going to also give them a multiple listing service addendum, which we're going to go over. I'm going to give the seller we already signed with, and I'm also going to give them a broker compensation advisory just to make my package complete. So I wanted to point this out. So this is one thing you'll need to do if you have residential listings up that will not be in escrow prior to 8/13, okay? So make sure that you are providing that form to your sellers. There's also one, if you already had a buyer's agreement, there's also the same type of modification form. So I'll let you read that over, okay? So now we're going to get into the residential listing agreement. As you know, this has changed, but it's pretty simple changes. Most of it's going to look very familiar to you. So let's look here. So the listing period, it's the same of what we're used to. And I like that they put that it does not exceed 24 months. And of course, unless it's an entity like an LLC or partnership. So they've also added language for the maximum length of the listing agreement. Please don't forget to put the end date, because if you forget to put that, and we've seen that, this is not an enforceable contract. So make sure you put the beginning and the end on it, okay? Because if you don't, it's not enforceable. Yes.
It is for 3 months.
No, this is the listing agreement. This is we're not on the forms yet. So what we're going over is everything that we have not covered that will have stuff that is compensation type stuff.
Oh.
So this is a residential listing agreement. So you're going to come down here. So here's the difference and I like this grid. You see that they've put this, that the amount of real estate commissions is not fixed by law. Pay close attention to C1 and C2. So these are the ones that are going to be fairly new. So compensation to seller's broker only the seller side. You're only on this listing agreement, putting your 3, 4, 5% here, only for you, the listing agent, okay? So you will fill that in here. And then if you look at C2, additional compensation to seller's broker if there's an unrepresented buyer. If there is a buyer, I would probably check this and negotiate up front. There may be a buyer that says, I'm not going to be represented by anybody. If they're a lawyer or things like that, it's probably okay. And it is entirely up to the buyer. But if you have an unrepresented buyer, you're still going to do some extra work, right? You're not dueling with them because we have a form to handle that is going to advise them you're not their agent. But if it is an unrepresented, person buying the property, then you may want to upfront negotiate with the seller if they will provide you any additional compensation. So I'll leave that to you. There will be a form that will advise that buyer that you do not represent them, and I have that in the package. So C3, continuation of right to for compensation for broker identified prospective buyers. So this would be, let's say if this agreement expires, right? But you're going to say, I'm going to put another 30 or 60 days to protect myself because I have shown a lot of people, either through yourself or through other brokers, this property. So it's probably a good idea to think about what time period you want to put in there so that you ensure your payment of commission. If one of those buyers comes back around, and this isn't new to us, we had things on the other listing agreement, they come back around, you still want to be paid. Okay. So you need to figure out how many days you want to put in there. Okay. That's a business decision. Seller obligation to pay previous brokers. You need to be asking that seller, do you have any obligations to pay previous brokers? And you need to make sure that you understand if they do or they don't, and what properties that would cover. Okay, so the rest of this is going to look familiar. So go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, going back to the commission.
Okay, we're back at A1 or which one?
C1.
C1.
Normally, let's say I tell the sellers, I charge 6% and I give 3 to the seller.
No. No, no more. Only, right, Peter? Only you. Yeah. You're not covering the other broker on this listing agreement. You're covering your commission.
Oh, okay, because I thought this was a listing agreement, nothing to do with the MLS input. You see where I'm confused? This is a listing agreement. Right?
Correct.
Right. I thought the new law only, whatever I put here doesn't go on the MLS.
That is correct, but
So
you
that's
still
right.
need to negotiate upfront what the seller is going to pay you.
Okay.
Just like we have in the past,
Oh,
we've always,
just me.
only you. And we'll show you through
See,
this.
that's the first time I hear that.
Okay, so we'll show you through this training other forms you're going to use to talk about the buyer's compensation, the buyer's broker, okay?
You can, all of the commissions that you indicated on that LPA, you can still share a little bit of it with the buyer's broker, but you have to disclose it to all the parties.
Right.
Yeah, here.
No, there's forms.
Okay.
No, not here. Yeah, just make sure that you're only covering yourself here. And as the training progresses, you're going to see forms of how the other agent may be covered. Okay?
Thank you.
Peter, can I answer my question that way?
Okay.
So like if you charge 60%, you can tell us, okay, we're gonna charge 6%, just in case you have to share with them.
No,
No, see, that's.
no.
Yeah, that's the first time.
They're asking again for Zoom people, why can't they put 6% and explain to the seller that they may be sharing that? Please don't do that. It says right here, only the seller's side of the transaction. This is how this listing agreement is modified for the NAR settlement. It is we have to follow this law, okay? So only your side. You're gonna see how to cover the buyer's broker. If you're a buyer's agent, we'll go through that, okay? So that's a big change, right? So that's all I want to point out on this. The advisory of the buyer's compensation advisory for the seller will attach to this agreement. And so right here where I told you the continuation, if you want to put 30, 60 days after this expires. So that means that you can still be covered, but you're going to need to provide a form, and I have that attached. So you're going to provide a form of those buyers that you were broker involved, even if it was another agent, you were showing or negotiating or had an offer, you will provide a form to the seller. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, these are the buyers I was working with. So we'll show you that form to cover yourself.
We need to provide seller with a list of the buyer who may be covered.
Yes, you have to, and it's on a car form NPB. They even made a form for you, so we'll go over that. Okay, so I'm just scrolling through this. This is a 7-page agreement. So we're gonna go, now we're gonna go and look at, this is the NPB. So now we're on the notice of prospective buyers. Okay, so if you want to cover yourself on that continuum and add 30, 60, 90 days, please make sure that you are notifying the seller of these prospective buyers that you are covering under this agreement. Okay, this we do in commercial real estate, by the way, all the time. We haven't had this form, but the landlord or the lessor will say, do you have any clients reserved if it's expiration? So in commercial, we're pretty used to doing this. So this is just reserving these people. If they buy the property within that continuum period, 30, 60, 90, 120 days, whatever you decide to put, then you're still going to be covered for your commission. Okay. Okay, so this is notice of prospective buyers transferees. And I'm sorry, I probably got a little out of order maybe on that copy, and I had the ladies do, but you should have the form. So, okay, so maybe they didn't include it, but it's referenced on the contract NPB. So if you have buyers, I call it reserving them, and you filled out that continuum, 30, 60, 90, 120 days, whatever you decide, make sure you're also providing the seller this form to reserve those buyers so that you're protected for your commission. Okay? Yes, Christine?
Yeah, thank you. This form is supposed to be completed before expire.
That's right. Yeah. You normally within for in commercial, usually a week ahead of time, we're providing names.
Right.
Yeah. So make sure that if you're not going to get an extension on that listing and you check that continuum box, that you provide this form. I would do it a week to 10 days early.
However, it has a date of offer.
Yes.
Look at the form.
Yeah.
It has, so what about it is we didn't get to that point.
You didn't, but we're going to show you what it means of broker involvement later in the training. Okay. So.
Michelle, what if you don't find that form in this packet?
You'll be okay. I'll send it out.
You have it.
Maybe it didn't get in there. Okay, so multiple listing service addendum. Okay, multiple listing service addendum will attach to the listing agreement.
Right.
Okay, so this is just an addendum giving some information, but I want to come down here to 5B. Hang on. So 5B. You can look at this. The seller does not authorize the broker to put in the MLS that the seller is willing to consider offers asking for concessions, or you can check number 2, the seller authorizes the broker to put in the MLS that they will consider offers, asking for concessions. So since this is so new and we don't want to have any $2,500 fines because we don't know right now what MLS services are going to allow to put in for concessions, please don't do it. You know, don't put concessions on the MLS until we see the format that the CRMLS or whatever MLS you're involved in offers, okay? Okay, so I just wanted to point that out.
Michelle, when you mentioned concessions, are we talking about credit for closing costs? and
We're,
stuff like
yes,
that? Yeah.
credit for closing costs, concessions for even commission, but there's forms to handle that, and I'm gonna go over the list of what they are, okay?
Repairs? Would that be a concession?
That, well, normally you do that, yes, it is, but you normally do that, you know, in a request for repair, you won't be doing that up front. Normally.
Michelle, by August 17, the MLS, those MLS, brokerage should have that concession on the MLS.
If they allow it, but as a brokerage, we are trying to avoid having anybody here get an automatic $2,500 fine. So please, when you are turning in your forms to our lovely ladies that input the listings, don't put anything about compensation, don't put anything about concessions, because right now this is very fresh and we don't know which MLSs, we just went to training, are gonna allow to put in for concessions. So please, no writing in private or public remarks about any of this. I don't want anybody getting a fine because they don't warn you, they just send it to you, okay?
So right now, that's our policy of the brokerage.
Please, right, Peter? Please, we don't want any of you getting a fine. It's huge, okay?
Gotcha. Compensation at all.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Even saying that the seller willing to consider concession.
yeah, he said, don't even put in the private or public remarks that the seller is willing to consider concessions. We want to be very careful because we don't want these $2,500 fines led against our agents, okay? So the broker's compensation advisory is an advisory that attaches to the listing agreement. And it just, mentions that, everything's negotiable. And here, when you look at this broker agreement with buyer, so some buyers may be pushing back, and we're going to get to the buyer representation agreement. Here it's required by law. It's not my requirement. It's not your requirement. It's simply what we must do to conform with the law. So I highlighted that for you. So when we're here on Thursdays for the next 3 weeks, if you and I and Peter or who's ever in here training with me, we need to practice what to say to a buyer to get those forms signed. We'll role play. Let's do it. We want to make sure that you're all comfortable, but we need to be complying with this law. So it is not our requirement or your requirement. It is the settlement requirement, the NAR settlement.
That's every Thursday at what time?
I'm going to do an announcement. I believe I'll do 1 o'clock until we feel good. Until you say, Uncle, I'm done, I got it, then we'll stop, but we're gonna make sure we understand, okay?
Now, so later on, we understand the policy of the brokerage is there's no concessions right now. They don't offer.
Yeah, no, please don't on the MLS.
But if the policy of the brokerage will change from that, you let us know, right?
Yeah, Peter will let you know.
Thank you.
Okay, so here is the California Residential Purchase Agreement. We've all seen this, but I want to point out the grid looks the same here. So we've seen this already, right? So the seller credit, if any, to buyer. Here's your concessions. You can handle this on the offer. Right here, Q1. This is the concessions, like here it defaults to closing costs, right? This commission is handled separately. You're gonna do an CAR form SPBB where you're asking for commission for the buyer's agent. But let me caution you, prior to you asking, you need to have that buyer contract signed. We're gonna go over it, okay? So these we've already seen. If you want your commission paid, you wanna ask, if you're gonna ask the seller, please don't miss checking this box and adding that form. We're gonna go over it. That is all I'm gonna point out on this because I want to show you how they're all gonna flow together. So here is the attachment. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller were presenting a great offer, and I'm gonna ask you to pay the commission. So here it is. It's very simple. You fill out the top, check the amount here, the percentage of the purchase price, or maybe you have a flat dollar amount. So if this isn't on the MLS, you can ask for 2, 2.5, 3, or like we do in commercial, you could call the listing agent and ask them what they recommend. Now, once you submit this with the offer, this can also be negotiated. A seller can counter it. They could say, I'm not going to pay, or, oh, you want 3%, I'm willing to give you 1.5%. So this can be negotiated and countered as well, this form, okay?
So for purchase agreement, we're gonna check attach.
Yes.
Attach the, and then attach this form.
Right, but if you check that you're attaching this form, you must have already in place a buyer broker agreement signed. Because the seller can turn around and say, okay, I'll pay your commission, but I want that agreement.
So those two forms work together.
They work together, yes. But on the offer, you're only presenting this form.
Right.
The other agreement is if the seller requests it, you need to provide it.
Oh,
Okay.
It's not automatic.
Yeah, because maybe they want to verify what you signed up for with the buyer. Because if you only sign that agreement with the buyer for 2%, they're only going to pay you up to a maximum of 2%. They're not going to give you 3%. It works off of your buyer agreement. So if they want to verify, hey, that's what they asked for, but that's what the buyer signed for, they're going to ask for verification. So
that's 1B.
yeah, so I'm going to go over that agreement. Here we go. Buyer representation and compensation agreement. This kicks off when you're working with a buyer, okay? So you are on buyer representation and broker compensation agreement form BRBC. This is non-exclusive unless you physically check the exclusive box, and we'll go over the difference on those. So when you're starting out with a buyer, before you show them any property, and I mean before, not after, this must be predated before, you have to have this in place before. And actually listing agents, they're probably going to ask you if you have an agreement. They could ask you that. So make sure this is done before you put, you're showing any property. So representation period. So this not to exceed 3 months unless the buyer is a corporation, LLC, or partnership. So you put your beginning date here and make sure you put your ending date. Type of representation. This defaults to non-exclusive. We'll go over the differences. I would probably try to get an exclusive, and I'll show you why later in this agreement. So you can check exclusive and see if they're willing to work with you on that. The property type, it is going to default to single family residential, including condos, manufactured home, or if checked, other types of properties. So you can cover yourself for the default of these residential types. Maybe they're also looking for 5 units or more. So make sure you're checking all the applicable property types that you will be showing your client. They may be looking at vacant land too. So whatever you're going to be showing them, make sure you're covering yourself on the property type here. Okay. Now on the location.
Excuse me, and that one, it shows industrial.
Correct.
So I mean, the commercial is included, this form.
Commercial is right here, an industrial building. So the NAR settlement covered for residential, right?
Yes.
So what we recommend as a brokerage is that you use this form even for commercial to make sure you're gonna get paid. However, the NAR settlement was covering for residential, but the attorneys from CAR highly recommend that you use this form as a vehicle to make sure that you're gonna get paid commission. Okay, because even now, a lot of the commercial brokerages, some of them don't even use the MLS, so you're calling back and forth and asking the commission structure. So to make it nice on yourself, you could probably use this. We highly recommend it so that you can get paid if necessary from the buyer. So location, make sure you do not leave this blank. You could either go with counties, Orange County, Los Angeles County, or you can go with cities, but please don't leave the location blank. That's very important. Okay. So additional buyer preferences. So you can check this, it's not required, but there is a form that if the buyer has preferences, they want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and it must exceed 1,500 square feet or something like that, you can have the form filled out. So the attorney that we were listening to said, so what if I find them a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, and I've checked this and it's not a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, it's okay, you're still covered. This is just a preference list, okay? So that is not required, but it may be a good form to use when you're interviewing your buyer of what they want to buy and what they're looking for and what you could be looking for them. So properties excluded from this representation. When you're working with a buyer, I should have said it up top, ask them if they've signed a representation agreement with any other agent. Okay, so make sure that you understand that. So this will trigger you, if you don't ask up top, to ask them if they've signed any other agreements. Okay?
Hi, Michelle. Hi, Michelle.
Yes.
Hi, Cecilia. Excuse me. So any new form relate to the buyer, do we still need to submit to our broker company after we sign everything?
Yes, we need the documentation because we want to make sure if you have it in place, and we need to help you get paid, right, Peter? We're going to be updating all the forms requirements on SkySlope. We're going to be doing new lists next week. So our system will be updated as to what we're going to require from you. We do want this agreement because we need to know that you have it so we can help you. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do we need to use agency relationship along with this form?
Yes, anytime you're engaging on this, I would put an agency on it. I just didn't put it in because I'm trying to get to the new stuff, but make sure you're having your agency. Of course, on the listing agreement, the agency will pop on it. So yeah. If you're exclusive, I would
Okay.
always check exclusive. So in that case, put your agency on. Yes.
You know, in the same item, now that you mentioned exclusive, what if the buyer is working with several agents?
Then you're non-exclusive.
Right.
So I don't have to check that form then. B7.
Upstairs, upstairs.
It depends on if they're already on contract as an exclusive with another agent or non-exclusive. Let me get through and I'll show you the definitions, okay? It's on this form. Let me show you. So the amount is not fixed by law. They're reminding us this. Now, very important box here. What amount of compensation are you asking for? Remember, this will flow through to your offers. You cannot get paid more from a seller. You cannot get 3% from a seller if you only put 2% here. And they can ask for this form to verify what you asked for, okay? So if the seller does agree, they're only going to pay you what you put in here, okay?
So
And
there's
then
no limit to how
negotiate.
much you wanna ask for, right? Like, there's no ceiling, like, we can ask for 2%, 6%, 4%, whatever.
The ceiling is the industry norms, I would say, right, Peter? So
No, that's 6%.
But if you
not
put
3%.
6% from-
So they're asking if there's a ceiling, but you know, the ceiling is always gonna be industry norms. Okay, so on E2, what I just said, you don't get more. It, you know, 3% from a seller if you only put 2% here. That's explaining it on E2.
Correct.
So continued right to payment for broker involved properties. We'll go over what that means. Again, here, you can put some calendar days in there, okay? After the expiration of this agreement, if you want to protect yourself, you've been working hard, you want to maybe put some calendar days, 30, 60, 90, 120, whatever it is here. So you can, okay? So
Excuse me, one more question. What if the seller offer a bonus? Like those new homes, so they say
It's close.
20,000 more, and if you bring a buyer or whatever.
It's close.
I think it would still be limited. Is it, Peter?
Yeah.
It's still limited to
Whatever is put, you. put
the
that
form,
on.
because what the lawyer said is you don't get more than what's on this form,
Right.
you know? So
Yeah.
you can get less. It depends on how well you negotiate and what a seller's gonna be looking for, obviously, is how does your offer stack up? How's it coming in? They might say, hey, this is a great offer. I love these terms. It's worth me to pay for the commission, you know? So it depends on the offer too. You can imagine if a seller has one offer, it may be a little bit different negotiation, but if they have multiple, you know, it's gonna be how your offer is stacking up as how they're gonna agree to pay, okay? So,
Excuse me, let me reframe again the question.
reframe it to Peter,
Hey,
cause,
Peter,
yeah,
I'm going with the flyer, okay? And I put 3% over there.
Yeah.
So I go to Brothers or those new homes, and I come over there and I find out that they open an extra $20,000 bonus. And I already put over there commission 3%.
But
Besides
so
that,
that's the seller that you're dealing with, right?
No, and then I do it with the buyer.
You don't put five, but the seller is going to give you an extra
Yeah.
$20,000.
Correct.
The seller can do that, but you have to disclose to all the parties.
It's close.
It's still
You have
legal.
to disclose it,
Okay.
yeah.
So whatever I put for,
Disclose to the buyer too.
whatever I put on here for the buyer is the buyer. When they get over there, if the seller.
yeah,
That's what it- yeah,
let's-
it's up to the
okay.
seller to do.
Yeah, you can make addendum to.
okay, so let me move forward because we've got a bunch of people on Zoom. And then if we need to talk about the bonus more with Peter at the end, we will. Cancellation rights, non-exclusive, cancellation effective upon receipt. So if you're non-exclusive, the buyer can say, you know, I'm gonna cancel this. Or you can stipulate 5 days after receipt or whatever. If you're exclusive, the cancellation effective date would be 30 days after receipt. So that gives you a little more time, like hustle, show them your value. They're not going to cancel on you, you know, they're going to see your value. So this is one of the differences too in the non-exclusive versus exclusive. You have more protection on the exclusive. So if you can get an exclusive, I would try that first, okay? Time to deliver buyer personal financial information. So there is a CAR form that will go over the buyer's financial information. And those are the two extras for the people in the room that I printed for you. It's not required. You can, you know, rely on the lender if you wish, or you can find out about their financials. It's a good interview form, but it's not required. So you can either attach, you know, you can put NA here or attach it, but it will help you because you'll understand their financial position. And that form is really good to use for interviewing them so you understand where they're at. So let's look at this other financial considerations. So the buyer says to you, I'd love to sign this agreement with you. I want you as my agent, but I don't have extra funds to pay you. Okay, so you check this box and say, okay, we'll try and handle this in a different way. Check that the buyer does not have sufficient funds, or your other one is, the buyer intends to purchase with a certain loan product that will not allow, and you need to check with the lenders on this, because I don't know what loan product that would be, but would not allow the buyer to pay you commission. So if the lender has said that, then you check that box. Anytime you're dealing with a buyer, make sure up top you know who the lender is, and you may want to talk to the lender quickly, you know. But if the buyer says, I'm willing to sign this agreement, but I don't have any money to pay you, check the box. There's another way to handle it.
So that might apply to VA loans, maybe?
It may apply to VA. I don't know yet. I haven't seen any. I've been looking and looking. I haven't seen anything on it yet. Yeah. So here's the non-exclusive. Here we go. The compensation is payable only if there was broker involvement in the property. We're going to go over what broker involvement means. Exclusive representation. If this is exclusive and you've checked that it's exclusive on B, let's see, 4B, then it's exclusive, and there's an additional initial in this agreement because they want to make sure you understand what exclusive is. So what is buyer and broker involvement on properties? The buyer physically entered and was shown the property by the agent. The broker showed the property to the buyer virtually. Now, what the car attorney said, this doesn't mean you're just emailing lists, okay? That's not broker involvement. Like click, 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 email you a list. That's not broker involvement. This is you've taken your time. You're showing them the property, probably on Zoom virtually, okay? Broker submitted to the seller a signed written offer. That's broker involvement, certainly. They performed a market analysis related to the property or reviewed the property specific documents or disclosures with a buyer. Sometimes the listing agent pre-sends those. The property was introduced to a buyer by the broker. So these are broker involvement. That's what it means. It's not just clicking boxes on the MLS and sending a list, okay? That's not considered broker involvement, okay? So remember up top where I said if you want that 30, 60, 90 days extra compensation if one of your buyer comes in. So this explains the continuation of right to compensation for broker involved properties. Okay, so take your time and read that. And let's come down here. So remember I said if they don't have the money and they can't pay you or the lender won't allow it, here is the explanation for that. If you check that box, the buyer agrees to include a term in the buyer's offer requesting the seller compensate the buyer's broker. That's that form that you check, the SPBB. You're going to include that. So we are on 9.2A. 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 So if you check that box that the lender won't allow or that the buyer doesn't have the funds to pay you, this is how it gets handled. So for a transaction, this agreement is contingent upon the seller or others or both agreeing to pay the broker. So what happens if you send an SPBB and the seller says, okay, I'll give you, you want 3%, I'll give you 1.75 or 2%. That's a business decision at that point by you if you want to do that. If the seller says, no, I'm not going to pay you, and you don't want to continue because, you don't want to work for free, you can step out of the agreement and there's a form that you would send to the other side saying that now they're non-represented. Okay. But I think, most sellers, they want to sell their property. They're going to help out. So, but that's what happens. So if they can't pay you, tell them we'll try to handle it a different way. We'll ask for it in the offer. So reassure your buyer and keep going. Okay.
Michelle, I have a comment.
Yeah.
Regarding the box you said that the buyer doesn't have the ability to pay. Now, if you knew that the buyer does not have the ability to pay, but you didn't check the box. And then the seller didn't pay you.
Oh, there you
and
go.
You want to enforce the contract.
That's
with the
right.
buyer, You'll be in big trouble.
You
Because
get
then you'll be, in violation of the fiduciary duty, professional ethics and all that kind of stuff. So you have to be careful.
Be careful of the check the
Yeah, check the
box.
box.
Make sure you're asking. Is that what you mean?
Right.
The buyer?
Sure.
Yeah,
Because if you knew that the buyer cannot afford to pay, but yet you didn't check the box, and later on, the seller is not paying you the commission that you want them to pay you, and you want to enforce that, the PRBC, good luck.
right.
So make sure we check.
So what
Like
Peter's
the-
saying is when you're interviewing your buyer, make sure you're asking. Your fiduciary is to ask if they have those funds. And if they don't have the funds and they've disclosed that to you, or the lenders disclose that they cannot pay, you need to check the box. That's your fiduciary duty.
What's the definition?
If they tell you that, if the buyer that tells you that they cannot afford,
Then it's another
then
one.
that's the fact,
So if you check that exclusive representation on page 1 of the form, we are on page 5. You need to have the buyer initial the exclusive representation box so they understand what that means. You also need to reconfirm, not just for that box, but please reconfirm the commission here.
Peter, question, if you don't mind.
16, when you put in the commission.
Yeah, confirmation of compensation. Buyer confirms that the commission specified up above is here, 2E.
What do you know?
I'm on page 5. If you've,
Or what?
okay, I'm gonna keep moving. If you've checked that it's exclusive representation, they must initial this box, okay?
Page 5 of what? Page 5 of what?
Number 16.
Page 5 of what?
Number 16 on page 5.
A buyer representative.
Right here, buyers, I didn't know, okay. So I'm sorry, it's a little choppy for those of you online. There's a lot of questions in the room. So buyer identification of preferences and priorities. This is not required, but again, it's a good interview form. So you can use this form, ask all these questions. I think it's a great form. Then you know what the client is looking for and their price range and that kind of thing, okay? So it's not required, but it's a good interview form for you to use and to find out more about your buyer, which helps. So buyer, this is not required either. The buyer financial and personal information, this is also a good form. So as Peter says, you understand right up top if this buyer has the funds or not to pay you commission. This will help greatly.
If that's the motivation.
Yeah, and as Christine Finn just said, how motivated the buyer is, okay? So we're down to open house. Open house has changed a bit, how we're gonna act in an open house and what we're gonna be doing. So Carr made a sign-in sheet, open house visitor. It's a non-agency. That means that you as the agent, you're not representing those people walking in, okay? So they want to view and you're not representing them. They are signing here, right here, that they understand you're not representing them. If they don't want to sign in to this form so that there is a disclosure that you're not their agent, just give them your brochure and, let them walk themselves, We would like everybody to sign this so we have record. Okay, because this says that you are not representing them. They're coming to your open house, but you're not representing them, okay? And there's ways to represent them if you want to. So there's the BRBC, which we just went over, but maybe somebody in an open house says, whoa, that's too intense for me. I don't want to sign that. So they have a different one. you can use this representation agreement. It's called property showing and representation agreement. These would be great to have at your open house along with the BRBC. Maybe you can get somebody on a longer contract. This one has a 30-day limit. Okay, and it's non-exclusive, and you're representing them on that open house, or maybe you took them to another open house. You are going to stipulate the addresses here, okay, that you're representing them on. It's a non-exclusive representation, maximum not to exceed 30 days. So when you are at an open house and a buyer says, I like you to be my agent, if you can get them on the longer agreement, fine. If they only want to commit to that house for 30 days to write an offer with you, use this form. It will help you, okay?
But at that point, you have to ask him. Working with somebody else.
Yeah, you still have to ask them if they're not, if, you know, working with somebody else. This is a non-exclusive. So you could, if it's non-exclusive and they're only operating on that house, make sure they're not on an exclusive agreement with another agent, okay? So you always have to be interviewing, asking these questions, okay? So this form, you just fill out much like the other one, but look how much shorter it is here. And there's the amount of compensation here. So this is if you're hosting an open house and a buyer says, I like the house, I like you, I want you to represent me. And you give them the BRBC, go over that. They say, that's too much, I don't want to sign that. You offer them a 30-day one that pertains non-exclusive. It's a non-exclusive. And it says for up to 3 open houses or for other properties. So you list the address here. And you can handwrite this in. You take blanks with you. Handwrite it in while you're at the open house and have them sign it.
So this form used together with the open house visitor.
Only if they want your representation. The open house visitor log clearly states that you're not representing them,
Right,
right?
right.
And that covers you. If they don't want to sign it, you know, okay, here's the flyer, you know. You can give them information at the open house, and it is for the benefit of the seller. And here at Coldwell Banker, we do not, George Realty, we do not authorize outside companies, outside brokerages to run our open houses, okay? So let's say I want to go to Christine's property and I want to host an open house. This form is good for Coldwell Banker, George Realty. It covers all the agents in the brokerage. So, but we don't allow outside brokers to host our open houses. I know that there are a lot of brokers right now calling around to do that. Just as a reminder, we don't allow that, okay?
So for open house visitor, the list is just for the visitor.
The list is for the visitor. Now, okay, let's say a family of 5 comes in and the children are above 18. You can clearly tell mom, dad, 3 kids, probably adult age. You know, we don't have to say all of you are going to sign in. No, who is the most likely buyer? You're going to have the most likely buyer sign the form. We don't have to chase the 5 members of that family around, okay? So
Until a visitor willing to sign a representation, then we use this form.
yeah, if they're willing, you can try for the longer one. If they don't want to do that, you have a way around it with a 30-day non-exclusive for that property. But always be asking, are you on an exclusive agreement or agreement with another agent?
Michelle, excuse me, in this open house, so, but there are no obligation for them to sign any paper. You say, no, I just want to see the house and that's it,
Give them a brochure.
If they don't want to sign, we can't, you know,
just go
we
inside.
can't make them.
You cannot give any more information.
Yeah.
Other than what is displayed in the open house.
Correct.
Okay? And then you cannot represent the seller to disclose any information to the visitors.
Okay. But somebody does, so I say, you know what, they don't sign, no, I don't want anybody.
So buyer or tenant Oh, hang on.
There's a question here.
Oh, no, I was just saying that if, in the cell it tells you, I want everybody to sign, whoever doesn't sign, you cannot show on the house. You know, that way you can tell the, like, you know what, if we don't sign, I cannot show you the house. You, it's requested by the seller, right?
Yeah, I can find out. I don't know. For me, I can think of all kinds of reasons I would be a little hesitant to do that.
Yeah,
Because I remember. back in the day-
But we'll find out. That's a good question. They're saying if somebody refuses and the seller says if they refuse, don't let them in. Yeah, so we'll find out that answer. We'll be training again next week, so we'll go over that. Buyer or tenant non-agency agreement. Okay, hang on. I'm sorry, I got very distracted. Buyer or tenant non-agency agreement. Okay, this is what I was talking about. If there is a buyer that comes to you and says, I like this house, I want to make an offer, but I don't want any agent, I'm doing it myself.
Oh,
I don't want you, I don't want any other agent, or maybe they have another agent. You're gonna fill out a buyer, non-agency agreement. You can give as a listing agent, you can give information that is the benefit of the seller. And the attorney at Carr said you can even print them a blank offer. You do not fill it out for them. You do not instruct them on how to do that because you are acting as a listing agent for the benefit of the seller.
give them a form.
You can give them a blank form, yes, and let them fill it out. Okay, that's, so if you have that situation, please have them fill out this form and have them sign it so they understand that you're not representing them. Even you supply them blank forms, that doesn't, you don't want to create an agency. I'm not representing you. You don't want to be represented. So you want to steer clear of that and make sure this form is in place, okay?
Each form have our name under.
It's okay. The car attorney, the top car attorney said, for the benefit, as the listing agent, for the benefit of the seller, you can provide blank forms, but you do not pin it, you do not help, put your
Right.
pin on it, help them, nothing. They're unrepresented, and we need this form, please, for our record here as well, okay? Because that could be weird if we don't have the form, you know, somebody could say you represented them, but oh gee, you didn't represent me.
There's a place for agents to sign. So
Yeah.
you didn't sign.
Okay, so tenant representation, I haven't gone into this as much because I was more focused on the residential, but there is also a tenant representation and broker compensation agreement. So go ahead and use this if you're representing tenants, okay? And it should be almost mirroring the other agreement. So this is an old form, but I got a question the other day. What am I supposed to do with if a for sale by owner says, yeah, I'm interested in your offer and you want to be paid? Take this to them for a single party compensation agreement. I just added it in because this is so confusing with all these compensation forms. We still use this. So if there's a FSBO that's willing to take your offer, make sure you're providing them with a single party compensation agreement so you get paid. Okay?
This goes with a single party listing. There's a single party listing.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but sometimes it's so fast, maybe you're just doing an offer. So you want to give them the compensation agreement. So this is just for FSBOs because somebody just asked me that. If you want to be paid, this is not a new form. Just make sure you have the single party compensation. And I know this was a lot. That's why we're going to be here next Friday and we're going to be here for the next 3 Thursdays in the room for open forum. So I want to check and see with the Zoom people. Oh, okay. So Camilla said, we want to know what Peter is saying about buyers that can't afford to pay us.
Well, there are two ways. You can ask the seller to pay, or you can just forget it, you know, you can provide service without being paid.
So he said you can ask the seller to pay, you know, you check that box and then add that SPBB to your offer, or you cannot represent them because you're not sure about the payment. But he was saying if you, the earlier longer discussion he was going over was if you know they can't afford to pay you and you don't check that box on that form that they can't afford to pay you, that you have a fiduciary duty. You need to disclose that. You need to check that box. Okay? If they've told you they can't afford to pay you, you check that box if they're going to sign that agreement. Don't leave it unchecked and then think that later you can go after commission because you didn't check the box when they told you, okay? Anybody else? I want to check the questions.
Michelle, I have a question or comment.
Okay, Lori, yes, it is quite a bit to go over. I agree with you. It's a lot. And if you need help writing an offer, we are here. Call, make an appointment. Send over what you've already written up. Let us review it. Let us help you, or we can be on a conference call with you. I know it's a lot. If you, Doug Meyer is wonderful as well. You know, so any of us are here to help you. So if a seller refuses to pay and buyers cannot afford to pay us, do we just go look for another house or is there any other way? Well,
No, there, go to another house.
you know, you make your offer with the SPBB attached, and if the seller says no, maybe your terms of your offer weren't something that they would desire anyway. You know, there could be a multitude of reasons, but the attorney said, and I thought this was great, when you are a listing agent and you're getting these SPBBs in, you can approach it like this with the seller. Okay, so these are good terms, but they're asking this, so you can like add it on to the sales price, right? If they didn't offer full or whatever the case may be, he was saying you could look at it like adding on to the sales price to cover that. You know, whatever you need to do to try to help the seller along and get the transaction in place, it is entirely up to the seller.
Depends on how many offers.
And it depends on the terms, the offers, all of that. Like if it's one offer, you probably would have a better chance on that property of getting paid. But if there's 15 offers, it may be a challenge. But that's not to say that they won't pay. So, you know, sellers are on the market because they want to sell and they will work with you. I think, you know, Peter, what's your opinion? I think it's
You
going to
know,
work.
if
Peter's
the-
coming up.
The buyer doesn't want any representation, by the buyer's broker, then they can go to the listing agent and say that, hey, maybe I can make an offer, but you can help me do some paperwork. And the listing agent can ask the seller to pay him for additional money to try to help him to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be a full, commission.
Right.
It can be just a little bit of, on helping the buyer to make an offer, you know, paperwork wise.
So at the time when the buyer signing, the people is gonna, he says I do not afford to pay you, then that's the time we have to call the listing agent and say, look, my buyer did not pay me. If anybody does.
Yes, yeah, right.
So Oscar's asking if the seller's already, I mean, the buyer's already told you and you filled out your form properly that they can't afford to pay you. Can you, when you're preparing your offer, can you call the listing agent and kind of ask? Yeah, you can ask. Lori, you're asking that the listing broker is not allowed to share their compensation. The listing broker on the listing agreement is only covering their commission. So we, you know, we're not sharing our commission because you're only covering your side of the commission.
Michelle? It's just for, future, a good tool of mine is, net sheet, seller's net sheet. Should I change, like
Like this.
like, you know, how you have escrow fees, title fees,
Yeah, the net sheet would,
They have commissions.
so the net sheet normally help because I'm usually with Shumay on a listing side, the commission is always included. But the net sheets, because it is a requirement of escrow to disclose commissions, will now include on the buyers, if the buyer's paying, there will be commission in there. They have to disclose it. It is a must.
No, I understand that, but when I go to a listing presentation,
When you go to
how
a,
should I get fit into, it? Like, it's gonna be 6% no matter what. I mean, you know what I mean? You gotta tell the
it's
seller.
negotiable.
Well, of course it is, because they haven't signed it yet. You're just telling the seller, this is what they're gonna.
You can label,
It's an estimation.
right, you can label your commission. And then you could put possible buyer's agent commission.
Right,
So they know it could or could not. And again, it does,
because that's a big tool, because they see their net proceeds and they're all.
and people on Zoom, I hope that it's hard because there's a lot of people in here and everybody's talking. So there's a lot of excitement
You
and
should join us.
we're all, going over it. But if we need to do this next week again on Friday, we can come back over at least the buyer's agreement and things like that, because it is a lot to read and to get a handle on.
So Michelle, I
Yes.
have a one question. For all those existing listing agreements, any adjustment or modification we should do it?
Yeah, if you have residential, yeah, you have to do it. If you have, like, I have to go prepare it for Shumay's residential listing that I'm pretty sure isn't gonna be sold by 8/13. We're gonna do
Okay.
that modification form. Yes, you need to do that.
But not commercial,
No,
okay? And for now, from now, we start using the buyer interviewing form or until the 15th
right,
for the
okay, then
buyer side.
you
for the
can
buyer.
interview them. Those forms are for you to assist you. It's not required, but it helps you to see how serious they are and where they're at.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be after the 15th, right?
Pardon me?
Not now. That means that we start to use the buyer's agreement, compensation agreement form after the 15th.
Yeah, it's hard for me to hear you, but yeah, use the buyer's form compensation. And if you want to include those forms, include them at that time.
Okay, not
Not
now.
required, but recommended because it sees the strength of your buyer and how serious they are.
Yeah,
And then
Okay.
make sure you know who the lender is and talk to them.
okay, if there's no lender involved. No lender.
Then you don't
involved.
talk to the lender, you just interview them with the form. But you
Okay.
can still interview them with the form even if there is a lender. Peter, I have a question. Can you come up? Because they won't be able to hear you. So, Cecilia, did that answer you?
Yes,
Okay.
if there's no financial, so no lender involved.
Yeah, if there's no let me come back to you. Does this mean, yes, Lori, we're not sharing our compensation. I think we answered that. Does our company have a minimum broker compensation to buyer brokers?
Yeah,
Okay,
the policy is 2%, but then, you know, you can always have exceptions.
Okay, so the policy, we like to see 2%, but if
Okay.
something is less, then talk to Peter. There's always exceptions, okay?
That's right.
Just give
okay,
Peter a call.
yeah, just on the buyer side.
So Lori, when you are performing getting your listing agreement ready, you're not charging, if you charge only your side, not two sides, okay? On that listing agreement, it's for the listing side only. So
Yeah.
what you would normally charge, it would be that for the listing broker only, agent only,
Yes,
not for two people, not for two agents, okay?
yeah.
Any other questions while Peter's standing here on camera?
Any more questions for Michelle or me?
Oh, Kathy's asking, did you see that?
Yeah, yeah. If you can look into 2.5% and listing agent, if listing agent comes representing a client, so the listing agent will CR, so therefore, yes, the listing agent can do that.
Yes,
It's up to the seller.
it's-
It's always up to the seller if they decided to have more commission to be paid to the listing agent, yeah, they can negotiate that anytime. But it has to be transparent. You have to disclose it to the buyer also.
Mhm.
Okay?
Oh, thank you. Any other questions while we have Peter standing here by the mic? Okay, well, we'll continue this discussion. You have anything else to say?
Peter,
This is fine.
Peter, I have a question over here, or if I do the listing presentation, and I go through.
Thank you all for attending. We've appreciated you coming today. We will continue this next week and we really appreciate it. We'll be here next week and we'll be here on Thursdays. We will send out notice. We're gonna keep hammering on these forms until we all understand them and we can get through. And maybe we'll do some role playing on how to talk to your buyers. So thank you all. I wish you all a beautiful.
Hi, Michelle, Thursday at what time?
I'm not
Thursday.
sure yet. I'm thinking 1 o'clock. We'll send out a
Okay.
notice.
It
Okay.
won't be a
Yeah.
conflict
Thank you
with
so
the
much,
board
Yeah,
Michelle.
meeting.
thank you all.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Always my
Bye.
honor. Thank you.
Bye-bye.